Hello, and welcome back to another episode of the LBG Reviews Retrospective series. Now, if you're wondering, yes, this is not a Wylde Flowers video like I said it would be last week. I realized after my trip and after editing that video that actually it's the second week of the month, and so we should do a retrospective video. So, the Wylde Flowers video will come out next week. Oh, and if you're wondering what game is in the background of this, if you're wondering what game is in the background of this voiceover, that is a game called Another Crab's Treasure. Look forward to seeing a video about that game after the Wylde Flowers video. But with that explanation out of the way, today we'll be doing a deep dive and reflection on my Breath of the Wild video from last year. Now, my retrospective points in this video are going to be mostly minor, mostly background details I didn't dive into with that original video. So, a few years back, I was working with this guy to try to find a job. And during that process, I was reached out to by a group of university students from a local university that were doing a project on making video games more accessible. Like they were studying and like surveying disabled people, seeing how they played video games. I loved the idea because accessibility has always been a big thing for me, as you can tell by watching a lot of my videos. As a gamer who is legally blind, it has always mattered a lot to me, and this study kind of lit the fire underneath my butt to kind of like get me going on this, you know? But so anyways, initially they had come over to my house, they had shown me like a demonstration of a game that they had whipped together. No, they had shown me like a game that they had gotten permission to use for their study to figure out what makes games more accessible and gamers' thoughts on it with disabilities. Then they interviewed me for a little bit. But then after that, I didn't hear anything for a while. And then a few months later, I got contacted by them again saying that, hey, part two of the study is starting up. Would you like to participate? I, of course, said yes. And although it had to be done over Zoom because one of their uh, study members could not meet in person, so it was just easier for all of us to meet on Zoom, they showed off some really cool concepts for like ways to modify menus and make menus more accessible for people with disabilities, make user interfaces more accessible. And I released this video back when, right on the day that Tears of the Kingdom released last year. And I was like, cool, I want to do a Breath of the Wild video. So that way, that goes out right as Tears of the Kingdom comes out. And so I reached out to them being like, hey, I really enjoy participating in your study. With your permission, could I take some of, like, could you provide me with some of the materials you used to discuss accessibility with me that you had for, like, Breath of the Wild? And then they gladly accepted, and I then took some of the materials that I thought were the most interesting to look at, the most interesting to think about, and I put them in my video. And that's mostly where that story ends. But I will say, though, that this is one of my personal favorite videos purely because I mentioned it in a short not too long ago, but honestly, it's not too long, not too often when, honestly, it's not too often where you've got these ideas for a way to make a game more accessible and you know somebody who has already made the references that you are thinking of. And beyond that, like, that's really all I've got to say about this retrospective before we dive in. And honestly, there's not much I would add in between, so I'll pop back in at the end of the video to just fill you guys in on more of what's going on. Welcome back to LBG Reviews. Today we'll be talking about Breath of the Wild, but before we get to that, be sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy my content. I really appreciate the amount of attention my content has been getting recently, but I noticed that a lot of you are not subscribed. The more people that subscribe, the more people that will see my content. The more people that see my content also means the more outreach my content will have, which means that I may have the resources eventually to make my content even better, of higher quality, and even eventually do a lot more with my content. I really enjoy making these videos, and it would mean a lot to me if more people would know. I really enjoy making these videos, and more support is always appreciated, although I am happy with where I am right now. So as I mentioned, this week we're talking about Breath of the Wild. The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild was released back in March 3rd, 2017. Breath of the Wild's story has been covered religiously and analyzed relentlessly ever since its release. I don't think it would be a stretch to say that Breath of the Wild shaped gaming forever. However, I still feel it important to discuss the game's story. The game sees Link, the main character of every Zelda game, waking up in a strange room in his underworld, with a female voice telling him to wake up and to pick up the Sheikah slate off of a pedestal. After he does so, and after a very minor explanation about what's going on, you end up climbing a wall and going out on top of a cliff as the game's opening plays. There you see an old man walking towards you, but then turning away. And then the old man walks away, and then the game leaves you to your own devices for a bit. As you explore the area around you, you get interrupted by the voice again, and it tells you to follow a marker on your Sheikah slate. That marker leads you to a pedestal that, when you place your Sheikah slate on it, causes a massive tower to erupt from the ground. After you get down from the tower, firstly you find out that, the tower gave me a map of the area, and secondly, that old man from before suggests that you go investigate these structures that have also popped up around the plateau. Once inside these buildings, called shrines, you then unlock the game's main tool, being runes. There are 4 runes, but technically actually 5 that you get at the start of the game. There are the remote bombs, both round and square. There's magnesis. There's cryonis. And stasis. Now, after you complete the 4 shrines around the Great Plateau, the old man tells you to go to the place where the shrines intersected if you were to draw a line from one shrine to another. And that place is the Temple of Time. Once at the Temple of Time, you get your paraglider and you're able to leave the plateau, but he recommends that you go visit a woman named Impa. However, the game does not require you to go see Impa. Now, if you wanted to, you could go to the final boss fight right then and there. I mean, you wouldn't be able to get very far because you don't have much weaponry and your armor isn't that good, but you definitely can do it. And honestly, that's a good thing. Like, I could talk about the divine beasts, I could talk about the whole story about how the story actually began 100 years ago and how you actually fell in battle and all that. But that isn't the main focus of today's video. Now, the main focus of today's video revolves around a cool opportunity that I got to be a part of back in February and March. See, being a disabled gamer, back in February and March, there was a unique opportunity that was presented to my feet, where a group of graduate students from the University of Michigan Flint were doing a study to find better ways to make gaming more accessible to people with disabilities. Being a gamer and considering that I had just started launching my YouTube channel, I figured, hey, this is a really good opportunity. I could learn some stuff about accessibility, and also could lead to some better improvements with accessibility in video games in the future. So yes, I'm absolutely going to participate. First, the researchers in the study came to my home. They interviewed me for a while, and then they discussed my past with video games, and then they recorded me playing some games on my PC. And then a few weeks later, I received an invitation to continue to participate within the study. Due to some scheduling issues, they had to do it over Zoom. However, what they showed off was some concepts for customizable heads-up displays. For the uninitiated, a heads-up display is the graphics that never leave your screen in a video game. So in Breath of the Wild's case, that's your hearts, the weather, the time, your thermometer, the mini-map. Later on, that's the champion abilities. That's the stamina meter for your horse. The heads-up display is pretty much the information that the game deems necessary for you to be able to interact with the game world. Alongside those options, they also showed off a few concepts that they had drafted up for customizability for the heads-up display, and they used Breath of the Wild as their template to do so. I will be showing images from that demonstration throughout the rest of the video, and whenever I'm not directly referring to it, or if I am in the middle of discussing it, I'll be using some background gameplay of me playing Breath of the Wild while I talk about it. In Breath of the Wild, you have two presets for your heads-up display. You have normal mode, which displays pretty much everything I just listed off, and you also have pro mode. Pro mode takes away your thermometer, the time of day, and the minimap, and leaves you with just your hearts. So the researchers in the study proposed the idea of, okay, what if you were able to create your own templates and presets for your heads-up displays? Like, you could add a black background to your hearts to make it easier to distinguish from the background. You could move stuff around. Let's say you've got tunnel vision problems. The minimap is no longer in the bottom right, it may be bottom center, so that way it's easier for you to see and look at with those issues in mind. And then they also showed off concepts for, like, you might be able to change the color of the minimap, so that way it's easier for you to distinguish what's going on in the minimap. They also toss around the idea of maybe you could even name your presets, so that way, like, let's say in different settings in the game world, you're struggling with different aspects. So, like, let's say I'm journeying through the Hebra region at the moment, and for whatever reason, I'm just struggling with my interface. Okay, then I will create a preset that would benefit me for the Hebra region, and I could rename it to Hebra HUD. Now, before I continue, I would like to personally thank the accessibility gaming team from the University of Michigan Flint. Their study is currently ongoing, and they're working on finalizing it before they publish it. And when the study is finalized and published, I will leave a link to the study down below in the description. However, for now, I would simply like to thank the University of Michigan Accessible Gaming team, as it was a really fun time participating in their study. It was the first time that I'd ever done something like that. I thought that their concepts were really cool, and it's really cool to see some concepts that, like, you kind of have floating around in your head, like, what if the game did it like this? That might make things easier. It's really cool to see some of those concepts, like, in a visual form. I know that the accessibility gaming team appreciated my participation as well, especially in regards to the these images I'm showing you now, because some of the members of their team had never played Breath of the Wild before, and they had asked me after I was done with the study, and when asking me questions, one of them had called out and said, "Would you mind letting me know how good of a job we did with this, because I've never really played Breath of the Wild, so I don't know how useful something like this would be." And I said, yes, like, I've spent over 200 hours in Breath of the Wild, and sometimes the heads-up display can be a little hard to look at times. Beyond what the University of Michigan Flint has provided me to show you guys, I do have some of my own concepts. As an example, in Breath of the Wild, you can change the temperature at which your temperature dial at the bottom right of the screen will display. You don't get to see the temperature that's displayed there. You just know it's Celsius or it's Fahrenheit. Now, thanks to people being able to break down Breath of the Wild as if it is some kind of Jenga tower, we do know the numbers for that, but I think that another HUD customization option would be to, rather than having that dial there, could be to have a number there, and the number could change colors depending on if you're too hot, if you're too cold, or if, like, normally, like, yeah, you would have been too cold or too hot, but you're wearing armor that has expanded that limit. Another thing that I think Breath of the Wild could have also done, and now this is going to sound a little ridiculous, but it would have been helpful, at least for me, is the game does display, like, what buttons on the D-pad you press to do certain things. However, I wish that it would have almost been more like Dark Souls, where you could see, like, a image of what you currently had in your hands. As an example, like, it would be good to know, especially for me personally, where the aesthetics of the items cannot always tell me what items I'm currently using. So, like, it would be good to know, like, I see an image of the eagle bow if I had the eagle bow on my back, and I could see, like I could see an image of the eagle bow with the right D-pad button on it, and, like, underneath it, in smaller text, it would say, like, eagle bow, so that way I would know, okay, I know that I've got the eagle bow equipped. I think that Breath of the Wild also could have done something a bit better with the Sheikah sensor. It's after you activate the Dueling Peaks tower, or actually your second tower after the Great Plateau, to where your Sheikah slate gets upgraded, so that way you can now find shrines a bit easier, because there are 120 of them throughout the entire game. And the sensor works fine, like, it'll beep at you if you're getting closer to a shrine, and it'll still beep at you if you're close but you're going in slightly wrong direction. However, honestly, I wish that, like, it would have displayed, like, a distance. Like, even if it was some made-up unit for the game, it would have been nice knowing, yo, you're, like, 200 units away from this shrine, or, like, yo, you're 500 units away from this shrine. And honestly, that's all I've got to say about Breath of the Wild. Huge shout out to the Accessibility Gaming team again. I look forward to seeing the results of your study. It was, again, really fascinating to see. And apart from that, please be sure to like and subscribe. And for those of you wondering, yes, when this video comes out, Tears of the Kingdom has dropped. However, due to vacations and such, and not wanting to have to stress over it, I'm not going to be releasing a Tears of the Kingdom video, at least until, like, mid-June, maybe early July. However, I do want to do a video on Tears of the Kingdom. Tune in next week when we review Terranil, a relaxing anti-city builder about restoring nature to its former glory. I hope you found that video as interesting as I did when I made it, because all of it was so fascinating to me. Also, I would like to say that, honestly, it does not surprise me, but I do wish that Tears of the Kingdom had some of those features that they had mentioned, or that had been shown off in that video. Because honestly, like, there are, especially with Tears of the Kingdom, there are a handful of times where, with the Zonai energy, where it's like, what the heck's going on? Because, like, at least for me, since I'm slightly red-green colorblind, the Zonai glue kind of blends into the backgrounds of the fields of Hyrule sometimes. But that's really all that there is for the Breath of the Wild retrospective video. I hope you guys enjoyed, and we'll see you guys next week for the Wylde Flowers video. See you guys then. Bye.